On May the 22nd, 1960, Earth unleashed its greatest recorded force, a magnitude 9.5 earthquake that ripped through Chile. In 2004, with barely 20 minutes warning, a tsunami killed 230,000 across the Indian Ocean. History's biggest subduction earthquakes show us that entire coastlines can be transformed in minutes. How prepared are we for when seconds mean survival? These are the 10 lessons that demand our attention. Magnitude 9.5. That number stands alone in the record books, set by the 1960 Valdivia earthquake in southern Chile. Nearly 1,000 kilometers of crust tore open in less than 10 minutes, sending shockwaves across the Pacific and triggering tsunamis that struck not just Chile but Japan and the Philippines. The force released was so immense that it shifted the Earth's axis by several centimeters and shortened the length of the day. 44 years later, the Indian Ocean earthquake struck off the coast of Sumatra. The rupture lasted nearly as long, about 10 minutes. But the consequences were even more devastating for people living nearby. In Aceh, Indonesia, the ground shook for so long that many thought the world itself was ending. Just 15 to 20 minutes after the shaking stopped, the first tsunami waves crashed ashore. Entire communities vanished in moments. The death toll climbed to around 230,000, with victims spread across 14 countries. The waves did not stop at national borders. They swept across the ocean, reaching East Africa hours later. Emergency planners and scientists once believed that magnitude 8 events were the upper limit for most subduction zones. These disasters rewrote the rulebook. The seismic moment released by the Valdivia quake was equivalent to more than 2.7 times 10 to the 23rd Newton meters, an almost unimaginable burst of energy. The rupture zone for the 2004 Indian Ocean event stretched more than 1,300 kilometers, with the fault slipping by up to 30 meters in some areas. Tsunami waves traveled at jetliner speeds, up to 800 kilometers per hour, giving coastal residents precious little time to react. The lesson is stark. In subduction zones, the maximum credible earthquake is not a distant possibility, but a planning reality. Risk assessments must start with the outer limits, magnitude 9 or greater, rupture lengths of 1,000 kilometers, and tsunami arrival measured in minutes, not hours. The countdown begins the moment the shaking starts. Every second counts, and the margin for survival is measured in the time it takes to get to higher ground. For coastal communities, these numbers are not just statistics. They are the boundaries of life and loss. Inundation depth draws a hard line between what stands and what fails. After the 2011 Tōhoku earthquake, engineering teams fanned out across Japan's battered northeast coast, measuring water heights and cataloging the remains. Their findings cut through theory. When tsunami flow depth exceeded 2 meters, reinforced concrete and modern steel buildings suffered severe damage. Wooden homes and older structures fared even worse, often collapsing or being swept away entirely. At around 6 meters, the evidence was nearly absolute. Almost every building, regardless of design, was gutted or flattened. Streets vanished beneath debris fields, and entire neighborhoods were erased in minutes. These numbers are not abstract. They are now the baseline for structural codes, hazard maps, and evacuation planning in subduction zone countries. Coastal cities once believed seawalls and engineered defenses could hold back the worst. In 2011, those barriers were overtopped. Water surged into power plants, ports, and factories, stripping away not just buildings but the systems that kept them running. Nowhere was this more visible than at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The facility's seawall, designed for waves less than 6 meters, was quickly overwhelmed by a tsunami that reached heights of more than 13 meters in some places. Floodwaters drowned the backup generators, cut off power, and left operators scrambling in darkness. Within hours, the loss of cooling triggered core meltdowns in 3 reactors. Incident logs from Fukushima reveal a cascade of failures. Emergency batteries drained, hydrogen gas built up, and critical decisions were delayed by confusion and broken communication lines. Engineers debated whether to inject seawater into the reactors, a step that might have limited the damage, but was delayed as managers weighed regulatory and political consequences. The result was the world's worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl, unfolding in parallel with the earthquake and tsunami crisis outside the plant's gates. The lesson is stark and quantifiable. Once water crosses the 2-meter threshold, even modern infrastructure is at risk. At 6 meters, almost nothing survives without extraordinary design. When planning for subduction zone hazards, every meter of elevation, every backup system, and every layer of defense must be measured against these empirical limits. The cost of underestimating them is visible in the ruins left behind and in the chain reactions that can follow when one system's failure triggers the next. Sensors anchored deep in the ocean are the first line of defense against distant tsunamis, but even the best technology faces hard limits. Dart buoys and seismic networks can detect a rupture within seconds. Yet for shorelines close to the epicenter, the warning window may be only a handful of minutes. In 2011, Japan's sophisticated system issued alerts within 3 minutes. But for many coastal towns, the tsunami arrived before most could act. Studies of evacuation patterns reveal that while technology buys precious time, it is community drills and local knowledge that often determine survival. In Kamaishi, Japan, students practiced evacuation so often that when the ground began to shake, they didn't wait for instructions. They ran for high ground, and nearly all survived. Social science surveys show that people who know the natural signs, like the sudden retreat of the sea, are far more likely to escape in time, regardless of sirens or text alerts. But even the most prepared communities face a deeper challenge: uncertainty. Along the Cascadia subduction zone, stretching from Northern California to British Columbia, geologists piece together the past from ghost forests, sand layers, and indigenous oral histories. The last full margin rupture struck in January 1700, sending a tsunami across the Pacific. Recurrence intervals range from about 250 to over 800 years, and the exact scale of the next event is unknown. Paleoseismic evidence shows that the fault can stay quiet for centuries, only to unleash a magnitude 9 earthquake without warning. This uncertainty means that readiness depends not just on sensors or warning centers, but on a culture of vigilance, where every drill, every evacuation route, and every lesson learned is a hedge against the unknown. In the Mentawai Islands, the aftermath of the 2010 tsunami brought a different kind of reckoning. Entire villages had been swept away, but the disaster also opened the door for a new approach. Instead of rebuilding in the same high-risk coastal zones, community leaders, government agencies, and international partners worked together to relocate survivors to higher ground. New homes and schools rose on land more than 20 meters above sea level, outside the reach of future waves. The design of these settlements drew on lessons from previous catastrophes: reinforced structures, setback zones from the shoreline, and evacuation routes mapped with local input. By 2015, over 80% of the displaced population had settled in these safer locations. Follow-up studies showed a sharp drop in exposure to tsunami risk for thousands of households. When smaller earthquakes and tsunamis struck in the years that followed, these new communities remained intact. This local success story is echoed in the broader push for governance that puts risk reduction at the heart of policy. The Sendai framework, adopted after Japan's 2011 disaster, calls for disaster planning to be woven into every level of government and development. It's not just a matter of engineering or emergency response. Risk management becomes a core responsibility, from urban planning to school curricula. The stakes are global. Nearly half of humanity now lives in coastal zones, and the next Megathrust earthquake could strike anywhere along thousands of kilometers of subduction fault. The evidence is clear: resilient recovery and forward-thinking governance are not optional. They are mandates shared by every nation exposed to the world's most powerful earthquakes. On May 22nd, 1960, the Valdivia earthquake in Chile reached magnitude 9.5. the largest ever recorded. The Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004 killed around 230,000 people in over 14 countries. And the 2011 Tōhoku disaster triggered a nuclear crisis in Japan. These events show that subduction zones can produce sudden, catastrophic impacts far beyond what previous records suggested. Despite decades of research, uncertainties remain. The full range of possible rupture zones, recurrence intervals, and the limits of early warning technology are still under study. Scientific evidence confirms that nearly half of the world's population lives near coasts exposed to these hazards. Documents from the Sendai Framework and post-disaster reports agree risk reduction must be built into every aspect of development and governance. History's biggest earthquakes leave no room for complacency. The evidence is clear that preparedness, education, and resilient design are not optional but essential for survival.